to the cloud. Oh, and I've got another. Okay, so welcome everyone. Happy holidays, end of holidays. I wish we were meeting under better experiences. I'm sure a lot of us are feeling that stress of the movement on Omicron in the last little while. I know from our perspective, we were in market when Omicron was just starting, and we're anxious to see what effect that's having on mental health. And we've been talking to a few other organizations that are also working on data collection to see if we can. We're all interested in that question, so we're trying to figure out if we can put together a timeline of. We're going to get data right from the start of it. Canadian Mental Health Association is leaving this marketplace, but they want to get one more. So we'll coordinate with them. So some really interesting data coming out around that. But we're still just trying to get our handle on what's happening with that and getting a lot of questions. So I know it's affecting a lot of us. So I wish everyone well. A couple new people here. Taylor is joining us for mood disorders, which of course was Ken Taylor and Dave Gollison before, one of our partners over there. Welcome all of our friends from Canada Life. There are a number of you here. Carolee from our board, great to see you. Julie, good to see you again. You got a lot of writing on behind you there. Jennifer, Allison, David, Nick, always on his treadmill. Wayne, I don't know if you're still at your cottage or you're back home now. And then also joining us is Felicia, who is a new hire of ours, who's working on one of our events coming up, which I'll mention ever so briefly later. And I just, sure camera's off, but Felicia's here as well. And Kim, it's been a while, but I hope you're doing well. And thank you for joining us. So the big news is we have gotten a second draft of the Guarding Minds at Work poll. And I would like to show it to you right away. I will pull up I'm going to pull up the version that you just sent, Brittany. Hold on. So just in terms of clarity on what the Guarding Minds report said, this is the second draft. The reason it's the second draft is we got a copy right before the holidays. And we looked at a few things, and we just wanted to get the demographic breakdowns ready before we showed it to the entire group. I know there's some work being done in terms of how this will release, what the messaging will be. But of course, this group put questions in there. We're looking to them for as well, spreading the messages from this. So without further ado, I will show you the report. So by all means, stop me with questions. So this is a complex chart, and this is not how it's going to be released publicly. What you're seeing here is a summarized version of all the data which has been extracted. From here, we start cleaning it up, making stories from it. This will become the appendix. It won't be at the front of the report. There will be a lot of words and graphics based around this, but this is what we have right now, because this came to us a day before the holidays, 2 days before the holidays. The people who were working on it were off, and they've had 3 or 4 days. So this is a very early stage response, but I wanted to get it to you as soon as I could. What you're seeing here is a summary of the ratings. So for example, the red on the left-hand side is the number of people who indicated high or happening more frequently. So engagement, 70% of people said that engagement activities were happening most of the time at their work. And then beside that, you can also see the breakdowns by various demographic factors. So while 70% overall said they were having engagement activities at work, 64% said that in the 18 to 34 categories. There wasn't a huge variance on, for example, that question across the entire area, with a couple different distinctions here. For example, transportation here, only 52% of individuals in the transportation industry indicated that they were feeling engagement, or those Guarding Minds questions involving engagement at work. So that's a pretty substantial difference. In fact, one thing we found here is transportation was very poor. across this whole thing. We did find some very specific things about first responders, which I'm happy to share with you, Nick. And of course, health and patient care had some variety, but on the engagement question, for example, it was relatively similar. But involvement and influence, for example, 59% here, 53%, 70% in finance and legal said that they were feeling those sorts of. So again, this correlates here to this 59%, not the 70%, but it correlates over here. Any questions? I'll send this to you when it's done, by the way.
I'd just like to let everybody know that engagement has always been the best rated factor, and it's because it really is measuring people's own sense of engagement in their work, as opposed to how well the organization engages them.
Yeah.
Just
I would say that the thing I took away from this on a whole was that finance, legal, and finance, legal, and insurance was very high across the board. Transportation was one of the lowest, while I found nuances in healthcare, patient, first responder, and education and childcare, that was in certain areas they were significantly lower than others. So this is just sort of a summarized document around this, and these would be the sort of provinces, the age, whether they're a manager or not manager, and what industry they work in. On the second set of charts here, and again, I realize this is raw data, very hard to pull through. You will get a copy of this, but I wanted to explain what it was before I sent you anything. We did note a significant difference on people, not so much in the LGB2S, but on the non-binary trans queer, there was a substantial drop on a lot of factors, including psychological and social supports. Mental impairment was also extremely low in terms of 36% overall, but that manifests itself in some of these subcategories. One thing that was interesting when we started breaking these numbers down was that there was not a more significant difference in the ethnicities question. So a reminder that the average was 56%. Because there were so many non-visible minorities at 56%, it kind of envelops the whole group, but there wasn't a substantial difference for Black, South Asian, or East Asian. Marginally higher in the Black and South Asian, but that's on a positive scale, not negative, which was certainly something we weren't expecting. Unionized environment was also slightly lower in terms of the support for the psychological factors versus a non-unionized environment, which you can see here, this 52% compares to the overall of 56%. Any questions, thoughts? You'll get this. I know it's a lot of data. So my major takeaways when I looked at this, and again, I've had this for about an hour and a half, was that I saw major differences in non-binary, trans, queer, mental impairments, where substantially chronic pain was a substantial difference. Not so much the ethnicities questions, not so much the size of the business. Unionized was an interesting finding. Then going back to the previous slide, transportation was a substantial issue here as well, which is something that I sort of noted. You will get this chart with all of these things broken down. So each one of them every question is broken down by all of these factors. That's a lot of information to take in, as you can appreciate. We're never going to get through the whole thing in this hour, and we're just starting to look through it right now.
Michael, had there ever been any data gathered on the psychological and social support, which I noticed was, pretty low, or was at the bottom?
Yeah. Hold on. They've gone out of order in the chart we have here, so we're trying to. Let me find it on the question on that's influence and involvement. Growth and development. Growth and development was an interesting one on the transportation industry as well, too. This was where they scored particularly low. Engagement's always the highest. Clear leadership. Civility, I think it was near the bottom then. Recognition and award. This is the one you were asking about, psychological and social support?
Yep.
So this would be the provinces, industries, and age, and then these would be the ones on the demographic factors. what's interesting here is like, you might see some differences here on my employer offers the services and benefits that support employees. Small business, 45%. Big business, 59%.
Yeah.
There are differences in, there are probably 300 data points we could extract from this. It is really going to be a question of what narrative do we want to talk about. But the good thing about this is that as part of this working group, you will have access to this data and the ability to actually pull out what other tidbits you want. So we're going to be going through this with Canada Life, finding the elements that are most important that we want to pull out on a macro level. And then on the micro level, there's a lot more data that can be dug out underneath this.
Interesting that for small business, my employer helps employees to cope with workplace stress. Not great for small, but even worse for large businesses.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think, coming from a larger business, I think what often happens is the people in the business, the employees, don't know what is available because there's too much going on. And especially right now during the pandemic, it's not even possible to drink all of the things in that are being offered by large employers. It's too much from my perspective. So I'm not super surprised, but interesting that there's a difference in this particular line here.
But what I find very interesting about this slide, and I agree with that comment, by the way, it doesn't surprise me because I think it is harder for larger businesses than for smaller business on that one. But when you look at people with physical impairment, mental impairment, and mood disorder, or chronic, or even chronic pain, how low the scores are. So when people are actually suffering, they don't seem to be getting the psychological and social support.
Yeah, and again, there'll be nuances like this in all of the questions. With 70 questions and what is this, like 26 factors we're looking at?
Yeah.
That we're looking at thousands of permutations of looking at what this looks like. And again, we're just starting this work right now. Nick, go ahead.
I'm very interested in all of the differences, of course, like I'm sure most of my colleagues on the call are. Do we have confidence intervals somewhere in this data, like in the deck that you're sending, so that we can identify what's a meaningful difference and what's not? So 55 versus 52 should I take that as a meaningful difference or not? Right.
So we have on a separate piece of paper, not in this report, the size of the N for every 6-1. So what I'm going to have them do is do a complex N for each and every one of these categories. So for example, non-binary trans queer was like 60 people. 60 people, you're going to get a pretty good size margin of error of, I don't know, 5 to 7%. But when you're looking at things like size of business, the sample is so big that you'd be looking at. So I would say number of people in the organization is pretty big. Ethnicity is very big, with Black being the smallest one at 100, giving you a margin of, I don't know, 3.5%, something like that, approximately. So I would say that the only ones that are going to give you any problem here are going to be the non-binary trans queer, would be the only one here. And then on the employment side, there was no issues on age, no issue on regions, and no issue on any of the industries, with the notable caveat, and I saw your note here, we've merged some things together here. So for example, if we're looking at just first responders, we have 7 categories of first responders. We could extract one, and then it would be too small of a sample. So, if you're looking, you look at the list of 7, and you say, I can only use 6, I could then tell you, well, the list would get smaller by 14, and the new margin would be X. So everything except non-binary, queer, trans, there is enough sample that it would be within 2 to 3%. That particular one would be a little higher.
Super helpful. Thanks, Michael. I'm looking forward to delving into it. If we have 7 categories, given the new prime ministerial mandate letters that came out just in December, I think we should shift the language then from first responders to public safety personnel, so that we're consistent with a new federal language.
And that's not a problem at all, because I don't even think it says first responders. We just summarized it, and then we actually have the specific titles and then created our own bucket from it, but we can change something.
No, that's awesome. I'm just ecstatic and looking forward to chewing into the data like I'm sure everybody else is. Sorry.
Yeah, and again, what I'll do, if you have specific questions about the ends on like you've got the questions. So if you pull the questions and you say, this is what we've categorized as first responders, it's listed on the questions. Because we did that bucketing before we even asked the question. And you say, but I don't want this one. I could tell you how many that is, and you can work on the, and I can tell you how many we have. It should be pretty straightforward. Any other questions? I'm kind of hesitant to just go through this slide by slide because there are 50 slides and it'll take you more than a minute to process all of the information. Is there anything particular you guys want to look at while I'm going through this? With the caveat that I haven't looked through this myself yet.
So knowing that you haven't looked through it yourself yet, to the extent you have, Michael, is there anything that you're seeing that is like going, whoa, I didn't expect that?
Well, I sort of expected the insurance industry to come back more positive than others. The extent of how positive that industry is surprised me. The very low scores on transportation surprised me as well as the fact that unionized came back low. The fact that there was no real significant change on ethnicities was a surprise for me as well. I thought there would be more differences in the ethnicities. There are a few here, which I want to get to, which are the questions we added as a group. Okay, so this was the questions we added as a group. I feel very comfortable talking to my supervisor about mental health challenges. Not a huge amount of variance here. My organization addresses the mental health. Again, the baseline is 32 on average. So there's not a huge difference here, with the exception of this one, finance and industry. Look at this, 44% in this industry indicate that they're getting that their organization addresses behavior that harms mental health. That's substantially higher than anyone else.
Mhm.
But look at the next question, where if they disclosed a mental health issue, it would not affect their career prospects. So,
yeah.
Oh, 30, so it would not affect their career prospects. Okay, so that's all right. I was thinking that it would.
18% on transportation though.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We have a historical data set to compare this to see that maps on with a large enough sample size that we can make a fair comparison to see if we've seen improvements over time here.
So we do for the Guarding Minds at Work statements. There's a comparative one on a 4-point scale. But these additional workplace questions were invented by this group over that time. So we have no comparison for those. Again, I feel comfortable talking about with high-level management. It's substantially lower on manufacturing and transportation here. Also interesting that it's high in Atlantic Canada.
Are there any organizations that we know of who, as part of their regular surveying, they might be asking some of these questions, sort of to Nick's point, for us just to be able to sort of say, that's interesting that at a Canada level, we're seeing this, and other organizations in Canada who might be doing their own surveying, they've seen something different,
Yeah, there would be questions here or there that would be addressed by other ones, but I don't think I've seen anything this comprehensive. I'm not trying to toot our own horn, but I don't think I've seen anything this comprehensive.
I don't either. I know IBM, we have questions that are like some of these that we've asked for the past couple of years in our engagement. That obviously I'd have to, get permission from the IBM Canada team to be able to look at it. But I'm just curious whether there's other organizations across Canada that might, again, just for the sake of sort of to Nick's point, it'd kind of be interesting to know. And what's the so what here? I mean, we've established a baseline. We have a sense of what it is. And now as we continue to survey, we can keep looking at it. But would we say this is normal, expected, unusually low?
Yeah, we have to look at specific instances.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we ask questions that are like this as well. So probably not that different from what IBM asks there. But this one about disclosing mental health and affecting career prospects, we have asked it 3 years in a row, but we have not asked it for the last 2 years. And I think for me, the so what here is, what's that gap? So if you think the organization that is supporting your mental health and has, you know, resources in place, yet you don't feel comfortable, or you feel that your career would be impacted negatively by sharing that you had a mental health issue. That's a gap. So the work is in that gap. That's how we look at it anyways. But like I said, we haven't checked the last couple of years. We ask more sentiment type stuff now.
I'm also thinking here, while I've got Jennifer Feeney on the line here, we didn't pull out industry government as one of our key sectors, but we would have a lot of response there if you were interested in that data.
Yeah, for sure. And just on the questions, we do have a couple of similar type questions that are here. For instance, I feel comfortable talking to my supervisor about mental health challenges. That is on the public service employee survey. And the one about career aspects like fear of reprisal, those types of questions are there as well. It's like,
yeah, I was thinking about you got
Mhm.
the TBS one that you do, which we certainly consulted when we thought about these questions. So if we added government, we might be able to do some corollary work there.
Yeah.
Okay. Brittany, can you make a note? Here's an interesting one that I wanted to share with Nick. The nature of my work includes inherent, unavoidable risk of psychological harm. Look at this. 48%.
That's much lower than I would have expected. But
Yeah, well, it compared to 18% for the overall sample.
yeah, it's much higher than the overall sample. So I'm glad to see that that's the case. It's still lower than I would expect, but that's some good indications of internal validity, right? So
Yeah, and again, if we refine that first responders and maybe we put in a group in there that may be lower than the rest of them, you might even be able to extract some higher number from that as well too. Microaggressions was an interesting one here too. We looked at it. 11% retail trade, 20% for first responders, almost 20%, 19% for health and patient care. Also, yeah, it's crazy. Because inherent unavoidable risk of, oh yeah, the same question, but this is just the number of people in the organization. Not huge differences here, with the notable one that Black individuals indicated a very high level of, which I haven't seen a lot of other data which separates them from no visible minority, except a few things like this.
Well, and microaggressions is significantly higher for Blacks as well.
Absolutely. Look at this, 28% for Blacks. There's some crazy stuff there. As I said, there's 1,000 small little stories here. The challenge that is now going to face this team is, how do we storify this into one bigger narrative? Because we've got 1,000 micro stories here. How do we storify this into a broader one? And my concern is, and the reason I'm thankful for everyone here, is that there are people here who may want to pick apart in great nuance some things that we may not be able to get to on the macro level.
I have a
Burnt
quick
out.
question there, Michael. Sorry, I just got a note. I have to go and deal with a clinical problem here for a second. But so I'll have to leave early. Do we have a plan for what you guys are dealing with on the macro level? Like, do we have is there an analytic plan and frame already that we'd be able to? That's what you were just getting to, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So very quickly, I think our release date, Marianne, can you confirm the release date we were talking about was the end of next week, or was it was 13th, 14th? Something like that, 12th?
Oh, now I don't know. Allison,
18th?
you're on. Is it the
Yeah.
17th?
We've been talking about the 17th. So we've,
2 weeks.
obviously just received a little more data today. And so we're assessing that, and we'll be finalizing a plan for media in the coming days, and we'll be sharing back more details with the group. But our tentative timeline is the 17th.
So just spreading out a little more from that. Yeah, we'll be finishing this report around the 13th, 14th for ready for distribution on the 17th. We will communicate by email when this will be released. And if anyone wants to contribute or add a comment or for example, they want to add a quote to it or something, we'll be reaching out via email. The other thing we're working on is a data sharing waiver, because I know there's data here that some of you want to dig into. So we'll be getting that ready to go in the next little while, as well as just really inquiring who wants the data. I don't quite know from this group who wants it, who has the capacity to analyze it, but you could let us know you're interested in that. That's primarily what we're working on, is building a narrative. And then once you get the data yourself, and there are elements that are not part of the broader narrative we're talking about, do you have an interest in releasing something yourself or talking about something yourself? That would be what I would go to next.
And I think just to add to that, from our perspective, just to layer on what Allison was saying with the media release, we do have social media planned as well, and it would be starting on the release date for the media release. And we'll be releasing, the plan was that we had talked about doing infographics, one of the high level basic sector, age, gender, those type of statistics, and then whatever's most newsworthy, and then looking at as well having an infographic for the marginalized groups. So those we would be playing into for our social media plan, and we're very happy to have anybody here if you wanted to provide any type of quote or of the findings of what you've seen. We're very happy to tag you in the social media as well.
So I'm going to step off right away, but Jill, if you and I could then connect offline, I wouldn't mind directly connecting you with the national media sharing team that does for all the public safety personnel, because I'm sure that they would, one, be happy to share it, and two, that they'd probably be happy to contribute and participate in that if that's okay with you and Michael and whoever else needs it to be okay with.
Yeah, I think if you connect with me, Nick, I can connect you with the right people. We have Allison and Liz on the call, as well as Kim. So I think they'll be the right people to help connect you.
Terrific. Awesome. All right. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks, Nick. Always a pleasure. Any other thoughts on that? I'll just go around the table. Taylor, anything from the mood disorder side?
Yeah, I think just at this point, like if we could just be looped in on anything, that would be really helpful. I know Dave would definitely want to get eyes on things as well. So yeah, so just send whatever you can our way. That'd be awesome.
I would note that mood disorders was explicitly stated as one of the factors that we were looking at. So there might be some elements you could share there as well.
Yeah.
Carolee, anything from the ATP side?
Well, I think we'd be interested in that Alberta data in particular, which is what we're always interested in. So that's, if you can send that my way, that would be great.
Great.
If there's something to say there that's fairly positive, or that somehow we can relate back to our own effort in the external and internal space when it comes to mental health, then we can probably arrange that. But Michael, it takes a little while to get those things approved, but in any case, it's possible to do it. It's just a matter of figuring out what exactly that is, and then the relationship to the work that we're doing here in Alberta.
Mr. Herman, I realize we haven't extracted out lawyers as on this main chart. Brittany, could you make a note to extract the lawyer number and see what our N is on that? Because we could give you explicitly the lawyer information, which you might be interested.
Yeah, even if you can't, just for the broader group, what I'd like to try and be able to do is share probably certain elements of it with the more generally within the legal profession to a lot of the other firms, as well as to the law societies and the bar associations, and see whether or not I can get traction from any of them. So if there's enough that the statistical on the lawyers makes sense, great. If not, I think we can still use it effectively.
I have a joke going through my head, which is, would this be the first time ever there are not enough lawyers?
It would be rare.
I suspect we have enough. It's a pretty common profession, but we'll take a look. Julie, anything from the IBM perspective?
All good, thanks.
Okay. Jennifer, as I said, I don't think we've extracted the government data. It was not one of our priority groups, but that doesn't mean it's not important to you. We could always extract that data out. It would be a pretty quick thing to add it and get that over to you. Is there anything else that you'd be looking for or might want to share?
No, the government data would be obviously ideal, and we'd like to do some work in terms of delving into it and kind of comparing it with our public service employee survey that was done last year, just to see if there's any differences. Timing on that, I'm not exactly positive what that would be, but we're also happy to help in terms of dissemination, in terms of we have a social media account that we can tweet out some of the results and share them more broadly within the government as well as publicly.
Okay. Allison, we've already talked. Wayne?
Yeah, a couple of quick things. Great work, by the way. I'm impressed with how you pull this together and all the data that's there, and I'm looking forward to having a look through it. Just a couple of observations from our end, because we're continuing to do more and more in this area as well. And what we're finding too is that we're doing some real-time analytics, and the shift in mental health is happening very quickly, whereas historically it was something that you'd see a pattern changing in it. And even with this morning, even after yesterday's announcements, we saw a significant change in a few key areas that was really fascinating. So it's a bit of a roller coaster ride right now as well. And I'm thinking that probably going forward on this, there's some opportunities for us, and I can share some of that back with the group. And the second one is the pre-pandemic to now. And some of the differences that are going on, that because we were in that element before, and I'll share back out with you as well some of those areas where we saw very significant drops in the mental health side in certain key areas and what we're triggering them. And the third one, very quickly, is that the humanity scores that we're working with, that we developed originally, it's our IP obviously, but we had a couple projects we worked with Arizona State University, ASU. And the impact of how people treat each other during this is very significant impact on the well-being and mental health of people. And there's some really interesting data that I can share out with the group as well. And it's something I think we can think about as we move this forward, because we're finding that how I feel emotionally myself, how I'm physically, because I'm exercising or not, or in the impact, and we all know that there's an interaction between the two, then how significant is the interaction on other people and how they work with us, and not having that personal impact or personal interactions with people in place. And it's amazing, we're finding that people are saying that they're far more productive when they're with other people and they feel more collaborative and feel better, but they would prefer to work from home. And why do they want to work from home? Because they're saving money and saving time. And that's not necessarily going to balance it out. So there's some it's a moving target right now in so much of this. So I appreciate what you're getting into, and I'd love to share some of it with you in the group at some point as well.
There are two great thoughts. First, you send me any data, I will read it. I will read any data, how it correlates. I will happily.
And I know you will.
Any data you send it to me, and I'll act like a nerd and I'll read it. I'll be thinking about it while having a shower. I will be a complete nerd on any data you send my way. Two, I really do have to go back and take a look at previous Guardian Minds. And although they did have a different scale, I want to take a look at some of it for comparisons. We haven't done that work yet. Three, there is a ton of data here that we also haven't analyzed. For example, you were talking about working from home or working in an office. We have that. We just haven't pulled that data point out. And simply put, we've had so many variables, we had to pick which variables we decided were the most important. But you could spend 2 years breaking down a data set this complex. So we're trying to do a crash course in what we think is most important, and we'll get that done on time. But things like working from home, there could be people publishing papers on this 6 months from now, with some interesting findings on some of the sub-variables that we haven't even got to at this point. And I don't know how, Marianne, you feel about that, but I think that's part of the reason we wanted to talk about having some data sharing going on, as long as it recognizes the contribution.
Yeah, I mean, the more that that people can use this for the purpose of promoting, the greater good, what we learn and how we can make a difference, that's our intention.
Great.
So.
Perfect.
I have two more people on my list. Kim, I don't know if you have anything you wanted to add. Nope.
No,
Oh,
I'm good.
okay. I don't know who KULYKL is. Oh, it's you. Sorry. And you're on mute. Still on mute. She's good. She's good. Got it. Okay. So cognizant that we've got 20 minutes left. I just wanted to show you where we are in this. With permission, I would love to send this to you right now, if that's okay. Cognizant that it is a messed up document. We are going to be working on it feverishly all week, building a narrative out of this. We'll keep you appraised. But Brittany, if you could send that the results, and also please send the questions again so they have a corollary to understand exactly how that question was going to go. I also wanted to share to the point that was made from our friends at Canada Life. Felicia and David on our team here will be working on infographics around this. So as we start extracting those data points in the next 2 days, we're going to start putting some visuals together on that, and we'll be happy to share those. David, anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, one of the things that struck me was your statement about how do we storify this into a broader narrative. And I think in order to make the this messaging compelling, it's to identify a couple of overarching ideas. One of the things that jumped out at me looking at the data was that it looks like only a minority of people in the workplace feel like their needs are being addressed. I mean, I don't know if I'm making an assumption, but the numbers all look, at around 30%, 35% that my employer is responding in one way or another. I think that's a compelling statement, but I'd like to know what other people think of that.
I think there's different factors people are getting met. Like on engagement, there are factors they're getting met, but on other factors, they're not getting met at all. So it's not a universal comment that like all factors are being met. Generally, at best, 70% of factors are being met on issues like engagement. But on certain ones, especially psychological support, they're not being met. And especially when you're in any of those key demographics that were highlighted. That's how I read that narrative.
I don't think it's that surprising that you will have high engagement, yet you will have very low mental health support. Like it's people can be very engaged and be burned out.
Yep. And we had a high burnout rate, which
right.
There were two questions at the back end of that I skipped over because we haven't done any additional analysis on it. One is the burnout question, which we're waiting on more data from, and what sectors are most burned out. The second thing was we were looking at who implemented COVID-19 policies and was there input on that, and what sectors were that. We just got the open ends for that this morning. Like we're literally doing this as we talk to you. This data is, we're working right up until this meeting. And what the data said was that only about 2% of people so far on a group we've looked at indicated that there were new mental health policies. Almost all the new policies that were implemented during COVID were health and safety for masking, vaccine policies. Almost nobody mentioned mental health policies. The ones who did mention wellness checks, enhanced use of EAPs, expanded EAP programs, additional training, but we're talking maybe 2 to 3% of the population here actually indicated that they're getting new mental health policies. So there's some additional data points here that we did not show you because we just have not got to them yet. But we will get to them, which will be interesting as well.
And Michael, will you be able to isolate some of those by the different levels within organizations?
Well, we did ask, you mean levels in terms of management, non-management, or?
Management, leadership, employees, et cetera.
Okay.
Because one of the things that we found too is that the importance factor that people put on mental health decreases the higher you go. So it's because the focus is more on financial outcomes with leaders and senior managers and things. So they don't necessarily think it's as important as some of the other work, and which brings in all the education opportunities that are there for this group and for others as well.
For sure. Yeah. We looked at so go ahead.
No, I would just echo that. Looking at burnout and mental health of seniors, or like executives versus non-executives, or managers versus non-executives, is something that we're really seeing a significant difference in the government of Canada.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And low workload and burnout, and I don't think it's really much different in other organizations. So
No,
I'm
absolutely. And some,
sure, a focus on that. Go ahead.
no, you finish, sorry. Did we lose Jennifer?
No, I was just saying a focus on that area I think would help all organizations, because I totally agree with you saying that it seems like mental health doesn't seem to be as much of a focus for those who are in leadership roles, or there's definitely a significant difference between the two groups.
Oh, absolutely. And we discovered some of that in some resilience work we did in a study that was actually over in Europe, where we identified the key areas of human resilience, and empathy is a big part of that. But so many of our systems strip out some of that empathy as people go through leadership and senior, and we lose some of that connectivity. So, and that has a massive impact on some of this and how it's dealt with. So anyway, I could talk forever about it because I'm very passionate about that part, but I think it's something that we could get into some of our thinking, because that can be a part of the educational process, that to get leaders to rethink things that they've lost in some of their humanity and how they treat each other or other people would really have a very dramatic impact, and they will actually make more money as well. So it doesn't have to be just, it's a cost, it's actually an investment in people that will make your business better and more profitable as well. So you get both profit and people into that category.
I think there's some good effort to be made, and we're doing this at ATB, and having leaders recognize in themselves that they are experiencing burnout, but may not have recognized the signs and symptoms, because I think they often shove it to the side. So if we consider leaders as people who aren't empathetic towards those experiencing burnout, then we're saying they don't themselves experience that. And so I think that creates a bit of a division, right? And so we want to ensure that leaders feel that they also can recognize it in themselves and that it's not a weakness, right? And I think that's some of the work we're doing. And so having someone come in, you know, and speak from a clinical perspective on that has really helped especially our executive team, the C-suite, and we're taking it down one level coming up here in January. And so we found that as leaders can identify that, then in themselves, then they become much more empathetic to others and in their organization. And they're more interested in finding the tools and resources to help them. And that listening becomes more acute.
And it opens them to a whole new world. And it's amazing to see in the room how their whole dynamic changes. They lean forward, they're into it. They're understanding it better, because a lot of them are trained not to do that. Yeah, but did we make money? Yeah, but, you know, too much on that side of it. But anyway, that's a whole other conversation.
Just closing off this conversation, a couple media go forward. So we're going to send you this report. We're going to finish the data sharing. So anyone who wants the data, just reach out to us and tell us you want it. We can start putting the pieces together on that. I've got a few things I want to look out here, pull out lawyers, pull out government, look at burnout, look at previous guarding minds. Wayne's going to send us some data. I'm going to do the methodology page so we get the ends. I'll speak to Dr. Carlton about the first responders, and we'll change the language around that as well too. Before I close off this element, because there's one more thing I want to talk about, I want to fire it over to Marianne or Allison just to indicate, is there anything else you want me to do on this in addition to the conversations we've already had?
I'd just like to say I'm really interested in the government information as well.
Yep.
And other than that, Michael, I think like you, I've just got to dive into it now, and then I'll be back to you.
Yeah, it's going to take probably a day to pull the narrative out of this, because there's a lot of data there. Yeah. Allison?
Agreed. I think, you know, I just started diving in right before the call, and you know, we've been pulling different threads, and need a day to sort of formulate what comes next. But then, you know, happy to reconvene and you know, come back to the group with a little bit more on where we plan to go with it.
It takes you people a day. It would take me a year.
Well, you're billing differently. Moving on to just a quick little segue to something else. One of the ways we're planning on featuring this data is we are organizing a webinar on January 26th, which is Bell Let's Talk Day. And Bell is a partner on this. So We're trying not to step on their toes, but we did want to highlight the importance of workplace mental health. And so we'll be featuring this report during that. If anyone has not registered for that, I do want to call out your participation in this group, the contributions you've made to helping me understand this, to helping all of us understand workplace mental health, to this report. So we hope you can join us. We will be looking for people to lead breakout rooms, depending on the number of people we have. So if anyone's interested in volunteering for that, that would be appreciative. Marianne, I'm still holding a spot. I know you're double booked for it, but if you want to run a video for us, we will more than happily give you that special opportunity, which we did not provide for anyone else. But we will happily share a video of yours if you want to talk about guarding minds or workplace strategies for mental health and the resources you have there. But I want to make a pitch for it if no one's hasn't signed up, or if you want to share it on your networks. It's a free event. We're running for 3 hours on the 26th, 12 to 3 p.m. Again, what we're going to do is a panel, and we're going to have a speed pitch for all the people who have major resources. So we have CMHA National, the commission. Liz isn't here today, but Liz will join it. Mood Disorders is doing a pitch. Marianne, if she agrees to it, we'll do a pitch by video. We have a small business rep from Rise who do resources for that. On our panel, we've got Bell and Walmart, as well as the winners of award. Sklar, you know what I'm talking about, Marianne. Sklar, those guys. They're great. But yeah, so that's our event. I know I'm not supposed to use this time to really talk about a lot of stuff, but if anyone wants to participate, share on your network, we would be very appreciative. We think it's an important message to get out there. And again, it's free. And if you're willing to participate in a way, we'll find a way to engage you on it. That's it.
Yeah. Sklar Wilton is the consulting company. And can you remind me how long that video is that you want, Michael?
5 minutes.
5 whole minutes?
5 minutes.
That's long and boring. Is shorter okay too?
Shorter is always okay, but I don't want to cut. I don't want to cut you short on those. But okay. Yeah, and Jennifer, yes, I'm sure lots of people have events on Bell. I actually got a few invites for webinars on Bell Let's Talk Day that were not in partnership with Bell, and I was trying to think, why are you trying to compete with Bell on Bell Let's Talk Day? I mean, I get it, but why? Like, there's
But that's what I'm doing. It's corporations and institutions that want to do something on that day. Yeah. For their own people, and that's why I'm already booked. Yeah. Well,
we're happy that they saw the value of having a big free event on the day. And then when we were planning on doing it the week before, we're like, we're never going to get any traction on this. So we just called them up and said, you want to partner on this? And they said, yes. So that was an easy one. Yeah.
That's great. Thanks.
Okay, perfect. Felicia, our events at mhrc.ca. You might get an email from her. Wayne, thank you for agreeing to send out the link. We'll send that over to you right away. Jennifer, I know you've got a competing event. I'll send it to you anyways, just in case there's any crossover or anything on that event. I don't want to take away from yours, but if there's anyone who can't attend yours and wants to go to ours, I'm also happy for that too. But yeah, perfect. Thanks for your time. I'll send out a recording to this and you'll start getting lots of emails from us. Before I close off, anything from Marianne, Allison, anyone else?
No, thanks a lot, Michael. I know this has been a big push today, and hopefully in the next few days we'll pull it together.
Well, thanks for your time, everyone. And if you have any questions, send me an email.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for your passion, Michael. This is great.
Thanks, Wayne.
Michael, do you have 2 seconds?
Well, for you, I'll give you 3.
Okay, awesome.
But hold on, I'm going to stop the recording first so that
Absolutely.